This is KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and the maestro is back. Tim Hankewich from Orchestra Iowa returns to talk about some upcoming concerts. First off, welcome.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here, as always, and got two shows coming up. So let's talk about A Tale as Old as Time first.
You know, this is my 10th season, and there's a joke going around in the office, and I think somebody in the Gazette actually started this. You know, if you drop the E, it's a tale as old as Tim. But it's a program of Disney, and you know, there's no entertainment company on the planet that controls their materials more than Disney. And this particular concert isn't just the orchestra just playing a few tunes. This is something that Disney has actually designed. They've selected the singers. There will be 4 Broadway singers that will be joining us on stage, and they're absolutely off the charts amazing. Disney has provided the video clips, so it's going to be like if you've ever seen an orchestra putting a soundtrack to a movie, you'll see the movie screen on top, and we'll be performing the soundtrack. And the soundtrack itself, this is the music straight out of the vaults of Disney. It's not just some arrangement. This is the stuff that they were actually cutting when they were making the film. So this is the
sometimes going, I mean, how far back do you go?
Well, that's a good question, because Disney means different things to different generations, and they've done a pretty good job of representing a large swath of it. For example, the overture has a little bit of Pinocchio and Bambi and Cinderella, and there's also another segment where the battle scene in Sleeping Beauty. But the majority of it is actually more of the contemporary Disney.
Okay, stuff from the 80s and 90s.
90s and 2000. Princess and the Frog, for example. Okay. Hercules, Tangled. There's a lot of music from Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, and of course, one of the biggest medleys there is going to be music from Frozen.
Oh, of course.
Of course. And I expect all the kids in the audience to be singing along. That's sort of a torch song for their generation. Do you want to build a snowman and let it go? Of course. But also the huge blockbusters, even preceding that, because the program ends with Circle of Life from The Lion King. So there's a good cross section of both contemporary and I would say movies from more of our generation.
Well, it would be interesting from a musical archivist perspective to take a look at the old Leopold Stokowski arrangements and things like that.
It's really fascinating, because the older movies are mostly orchestral, and the newer movies are more vocal.
Oh, sure.
So a lot of the hit songs in the last 15, 20 years from Disney are all really like top 10 hits. Sure. It requires really fantastic singing.
And they're great.
And they're great. Yeah, Alan Menken, who was the tunesmith behind so many of these hits, from Aladdin to Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid, that's also going to be in the program. What a genius. I mean, an incredible tunesmith, and the lyrics are so funny.
Right. Well, it's no coincidence. I mean, there's a reason why everyone in the known world sings Let It Go. Let It Go,
absolutely. It's a great hit, and but to be able to do it, we're sort of deconstructing the whole process. I mean, right, when a film is about to be released, the last thing that they put on it is the soundtrack, and they have the big screen and the conductors conducting the orchestra underneath. This is actually sort of taking that one step back. We already know what the films are, but now we're actually seeing the process of how do you put music to the picture. So it's going to be really exciting, and it actually makes my job that much more complicated, because I have to keep the orchestra in line and work with the soloists, and I'm also watching the film. I have my own personal monitor, and I have to make sure we're hitting our marks to line it all up.
Yeah, you thought it was tough playing along with the ballet.
That's right, because a ballet can breathe, and they can alter, and they can adapt. A film goes at one tempo, and I'm either right or I'm not.
Well, this is not to go down a rabbit hole.
Right.
Although
Alice in Wonderland is in there too. Yeah.
But years ago, I hosted a concert with the then Cedar Rapids Symphony, when it was movies, and it was different movies, and they put me in a different costume. You know, for every segment. So I was dressed as James Bond. I was dressed as John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever.
I would have loved to see that one.
And at the end, for the Disney medley, I came out dressed as a mermaid.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, if you don't have your dignity,
Yeah.
Then, but
if you're going to be in the arts, you have to check that at the
But there was a big video screen with this, too, and, I came out and I said, and now, while we play this medley, there will be a delightful medley of scenes from Disney movies, and then I argued, in essence, with the projector.
Right.
The projector said, no, Disney will not allow you to do that because of all the copyright stuff.
That is true.
Yeah.
I mean, they really control their own, because when they say, we're releasing Bambi again, and we're releasing it from the vaults, they're not joking. I mean, all that stuff is sequestered away, and it's only once every generation. They'll pull it out for a limited release, and then back into the vault it goes.
They have a lot of control over it.
Yeah.
That is the reason why, to this day, your predecessor, Chris Chiemler, calls me Fish Boy. I might add. But that is that's a story from my vaults.
Oh my God! Yeah. Do you have pictures?
So anyway, it's
this Saturday and Sunday.
This Saturday and Sunday, and both everything is at the Paramount.
It's all at the Paramount. Yes,
you can't move this show.
There's too much gear to move this show around, and there's a performance at 7:30 on Saturday, and then a 2:30 matinee. And of course, this is designed for the whole family, because people our generation will really relate to the Disney movies that we grew up with, but then all your little ones now. I mean, it's
every generation has Disney movies they grew up with.
Right, and if you bring your kids, especially the little ones, the princes and princesses, make sure they're wearing a tiara. And, just have a lot of fun with it, because. Yeah, it's great to hear live symphonic music and see the whole process of how these films were put together. But it's also an occasion for the whole family.
Well, I do. I really enjoy when you do stuff from movies.
Yeah.
Because there is something about hearing a familiar, probably mainly orchestral theme that you've heard a million times, but getting to watch it, and then if you get to watch the live orchestra and see the scenes from the movies, I'm sorry,
you're done. This is it. Yeah. This is as good as it gets.
There are few musical experiences that are better than that.
And if you've never been to the symphony orchestra before, this is the time to do it.
This would be the one to come.
Because you'll hear and see the entire context of everything.
Now. Excuse me. Now, you've also got another concert coming up in a couple of weeks.
Right.
It's part of the Masterworks series.
Right.
And this is called New Frontiers. So let's just take a couple of minutes and talk about that a little bit.
So this is a program we are putting on the road. We have 3 performances on the 11th in Iowa City, the 12th in Cedar Rapids, and then on the 13th we're going to Independence with this program. And this is called New Frontiers for a variety of reasons. The 3 pieces and the 3 composers that are on this piece, on this program, broke the mold in their own particular ways and broke new ground or new frontiers. For example, we're doing a Mozart bassoon concerto, and Mozart broke the mold because he was discriminated throughout his entire career, because how could it be that someone so young could write music way better than people 2x, 3x, 4x his age?
That's right. There must be something wrong, you must have copied from somebody else.
Exactly. There was this cognitive dissonance. So he was working against that. He was also the first person to go from being a servant of the court to essentially the first freelancer international rock star. And this was also at the rise of the middle class, and so he was breaking new ground that way. This is also the very first wind concerto that he ever wrote. He would later go on to write a great clarinet concerto and others that are today the standard for the instruments. So that's one way how he broke ground. But the piece that I'm most excited about is a work by Milhaud called Creation of the World. And in the 1920s, there were 3 areas in the world that were centers for jazz. There was the Mississippi Basin from New Orleans all the way up to Davenport. There was Harlem, and there was Paris, France. Mm-hmm. And in 1920, Milhaud heard his first jazz orchestra, American Jazz Orchestra, and he was so taken by this that he went to New York and became acquainted with many composers, not the least of which was George Gershwin. And so he went back, and what he tried to do was fuse the popular culture of the day with the French-European musical traditions, and turn this into this piece called Creation of the World. Because in France at that time, African art was all the rage. And so there was a ballet that was based on African creation mythology. But what's really happening musically here is the emergence of jazz as a concert vehicle. And so all of a sudden you're going to hear basically the kind of music that was being played in the Paris cabarets at the time. And all of a sudden, in the middle, you hear music that you would swear would come from the pen of George Gershwin. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. And it was only 5 years later that George Gershwin would take the same idea of a person walking down Paris, going from nightclub to nightclub to nightclub, and it's a piece called American in Paris.
Yeah, nobody's ever heard of that.
Yeah,
one.
That's right. And so this is really the prototype for that piece. So and that's how he broke new ground. And then finally, the flagship of the whole program is a work by Schumann. And this piece was probably one of the first successful symphonies after Beethoven. Once Beethoven died, everyone thought, well, that's it.
Music is done.
Music is done.
We have written all the notes.
Exactly. And it fell to this person to forge new ground. Which direction is this new thing called the symphony going to go now that this master has passed away? So that's how each of these pieces come together.
Yeah. Cool program.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm excited about Disney, but I love hearing hearing your thoughts about how you put this together and the history behind these pieces. The Mio and Gershwin connection is really interesting.
And people who don't know the piece, will be scratching their head, and all of a sudden, I've heard this kind of music before. And absolutely, it's the beginning of jazz. Your listening audience already knows that jazz was the most influential musical movement in the entire 20th century. And classical music could not resist that influence. And this is one of the primary examples of jazz crossing over into the concert hall.
Oh, sounds like fun, as always. So it's the Disney show, Tale as Old as Time, this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Both shows at the Paramount.
Correct, yes.
And then you're hitting the road the weekend of March 11th for Davenport Friday, Cedar Rapids Saturday, and Iowa City Sunday.
Actually, not Davenport, Coralville.
Coralville. Yeah. And yes, and Independence.
Well, I can see where you were thought of that, because the music actually is a ballet, although this time we don't have dancers for it. So I can understand, because usually we go to Davenport for ballet.
I would go through all that again, but I just go to artsiowa.com and you can figure it out from there.
Perfect.
New Frontiers the weekend, the second weekend in March, and of course Disney this weekend. Drink lots of coffee. You got a lot of work ahead of you.
I know. I got to work sometime.